blah, 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 blah. Actually, there's a lot of blah blah in this film.
I know.
Okay, here I leave you with a movie. Enjoy. See you later. Talk to you later. MySpace me. Bye bye. Au revoir.
This is Louis Forthdale, July 17th, 1978, TL 4011B, Topics in Communication. Our guest speaker today is...
Who are familiar with Marshall McLuhan, born in Edmonton, moved to Winnipeg when he was 3.
He was actually 4.
Grew up here, went to Kelvin, just like Neil. Video with the guy with the shopping cart and the TV, 1990, Freedom. The phrase he got known for...
Professor Marshall McLuhan from the University of Toronto. All of you know Professor McLuhan, all of you know his credentials. I talked with you on the first day about my feelings about him as one of the towering people in the 20th century in the field of communication. I'd like to say something else now at a much more personal level. I've known Marshall for 30 years now, it develops. We were talking about it last night. I invited him to come down to TC for a session which I described in our first period. And we have developed through the years a kind of a close, distant friendship in which we see each other once or twice a year and exchange letters and so forth. And I've come to regard him as not only one of the towering intellectual figures in the field of communication, but also as there's a side of him which I admire tremendously too, and that's a personal loyalty, which I would like to express my appreciation for Marshall. It's a great privilege to...
The descent into the maelstrom, which had a great influence in French symbolist art, it appealed very much to Baudelaire, is concerned with this sailor who is caught in the vortex of the big whirlpool. Mm-hmm. And he begins to study the way it works. And he sees that some things go down and disappear and some things pop up again. And he attaches himself to one of these recurring objects and survives.
To have someone who remains a loyal friend for so long over a span of space. What I propose doing, since this friendship has got us kind of on the same wavelength, is engaging in it, at least in the beginning of the session, in a dialogue format, in which I'm going to pose some questions, generally as a devil's advocate because I know the answers, but pose the questions of the kind that I think would be interesting for the group to get involved with. At a certain point when we get going, give us a little while to get underway, then I would welcome you coming in, I always reserving the right to try to steer us back to what I think of as the course we might be taking because of inside information I have of where he's been and where he's going, I think. Okay, it's a Mutt and Jeff act that we sometimes do. Anybody remember Mutt and Jeff?
Mit me, Mutt.
This is one of the expressions in the old comic strip.
Mutt and Jeff, a comic strip in which Mutt is, or Jeff is a short one, and Mutt is, and the other one
Lanky,
is a lanky one. Well, let us begin our dialogue. Marshall, it seems to me that the milieu, in looking back over your work,
interior,
which is quite numerous indeed, 14, 15 books, 1,000 magazine articles, 1,000 speeches, the basic thrust of the thing has been, it seems to me, to invite our attention to the necessity of looking at the form of media and what the form of media does to our sensibility and to human arrangements, rather than attending only to content. Now, I toss that out to you as whether you think that is, as a beginning kind of, well, generalization.
I wish I had time to eulogize my friend Lou, but he has invited us to plunge right in here. And who is Marshall McLuhan, was the question. Well, that's supposed to be a sick joke. Are there any sick jokes about McLuhan? Who is Marshall McLuhan? What is the grievance behind the sick joke?
And when one speaks, what is that then?
Prose.
What? When I say, Nicole?
Nicole, apportez-moi mes pantoufles et me donnez mon bonnet de nuit. C'est de la prose. Oui, monsieur.
Montaigne's idea of the printed word, he said, service environments have taken the place of political policies. Or so it seems. Now, remember, I should always add, policies no longer matter, because whether your electric light is provided by Republicans or Democrats is rather unimportant. Montaigne's idea of the printed word, he said, gives you the feeling of everything you write is a message in a bottle.
Down in Oakland, that had a singing group, some older dudes, they put that real soulful, like,
provided by Republicans or Democrats is rather,
like people,
by the way,
like this, people swore that was a sample.
rather unimportant compared to the service of light and power and all the other kinds of services that go with our cities.
When we're on the telephone, we are on the air, and on the air we do not have any physical body.
And anything I say that is the way it seems.
On the subject of, is television possibly discouraging something that's very valuable? Do you privately feel that perhaps it is, for example, killing conversation, making it impossible?
TV makes possible talk shows.
How will right now
New literary
be transmitted later?
Oh, you weren't...
I thought there was lightning in my house.
It makes talk shows possible.
It demands audience participation. You cannot have a TV show without an audience. Those of what we would now call an extremely backward country, in which they use not their eyes, not sensorium, but their full sensorium. They would practically live in a world of ESP. When your whole sensorium is in action, you don't. But we now live electrically in a non-Euclidean world. The Euclid has been phased out because the eye has gone back into the rest of the sensorium. And without a public, there is no game.
And I'm not wanting to take over the show. Go ahead.
Nor were you accused of that. You know, maybe I can't ask you this thing then that I've thought of asking you.
Easterbrook likes to talk of your taking over seminars and becoming the professor.
For Edmonton, yeah.
All situations are made up of an area of attention called figure.
But they don't do any of the talking. They sit there and
they participate the way they do in football.
And captivate discussion in such a way that the professor became obsolete.
You never know what you're going to encounter next.
somehow we got on an instant playback just now before we came back.
Mr. Sayers would be an ideal person to have.
But they don't do any of the talking. They sit there and
they participate the way they do in football. To have a word about the effect of the instant TV playback on a football game.
Well, I think this made TV watching, more people watch the game now because they can see the instant playback. They can see blocks they didn't see, and this has put a lot of focus on the line play, where they see the great backs run and the quarterbacks run, but now they're watching the great blocks thrown by the line.
Service environments have taken the place of political policies. At the moment, gives you the feeling of everything you write is a message in a bottle. You scribble it down here and you throw it out there.
Now, one of the schizoid things, and I think this bears out, that schizophrenia is something that's quite proper to a print culture.
These are little iconic juxtapositions of overlays.
So I sat in 4 weekly seminars with him. There are always seminars in which the instructor never quite kept control of McLuhan's tendency to take command of his ranks.
I'm delighted to have an opportunity to broach these subjects in a group like this. And this makes the audience more participative in the game.
No question about it, it does.
That's what we were talking about through the talk show, audience participation and dialogue.
Yeah, I'm not sure they participate in a way that's good, but that's a moral question, isn't it?
They feel the need to get in there, and they'd like to be participating in the talk once the dialogue gets going.
Captivate discussion in such a way that the professor became obsolete.
You never know what you're going to encounter next.
In 2 or 3 of the courses.
All right, no memory of that. It is inevitable. The eye and the ear just are totally divorced.
Yeah.
And everything you hear is at variance with everything that you see.
Yeah.
Joyce said about Finnegan's Wake, what the reader sees and what the reader hears, 2 totally different things.
It's funny, the internet is here. They don't know what the hell is going on with the internet. What they're talking about is what Dad was talking about in the 70s. And in the 70s, he was talking about the 70s. So now they're noticing the 70s, and they're calling it now.
Information movement. The global village. Information movement. The global village is at once as wide as the planet and as small as a little town where everybody is maliciously engaged and poking his nose into everybody else's business. The global village is a world in which you don't necessarily have harmony. You have extreme concern with everybody else's business and much involvement in everybody else's life. It's a sort of Ann Landers column writ large. And it doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement. And this, he says, comes from using 2 actions, one against the other. I was very lucky to grow up in a society where there were no classes of any sort. The 2 double action gives you the emotional multitude.
Which we can get into.
This is the way it is for everybody. That's what the emotional multitude is. Feeling of universality, archetypal. My concern is conversation in which I make the discoveries. I make most of my discoveries while talking, not while writing. Well, for example, when I look up the word read and find that it means to guess, I couldn't bear multi-locational art. Anything I've ever. That's fascinating.
I have no desire to move into the world that I understand so well.
So Xerox, the electric thing, is a complete revolution.
And that's precisely why
And it's away from the eye.
I do not wish
It's all back to the ear again.
to move into it.
It's all acoustic.
Because I understand it, I much prefer the old mildewed world of the 18th century book.
People leapt from childhood into adulthood overnight. This is what happens under electric conditions again. There is no really childhood is disappearing.
Responsibility, instead of just a sort of a private subconscious. They are artists. Remember, an artist is primarily concerned with getting your attention. Whether he's a poet or a musician, his first wish and hope is to trap your attention.
So for example, why not use example?
245 on there is a flight number just anywhere, 245.
Joyce said about Finnegan's Wake, what the reader sees and what the reader hears, two totally different things.
And the cognitive and affective domains is separated.
Print culture is inevitable.
Are crapped on,
And then a print culture is inevitably hypocritical. What it says and what it does has to be different.
Yeah.
Is this in some way related to the fact that the psychiatrists have mainly dealt with...
Walt Disney, by the way, was a Canadian.
Civilized person. Freud is an urban, literate man.
He is a complete victim of classified. We still live under the aegis of Freud's classifications of personality types and.
The point is, we've had a Marxist rumor, and we've had a Freudian without having read Freud.
Both McLuhan and Goffman should then have gone from there to high school and university in Winnipeg is, of course, even more unlikely.
Bow wow, bow wow. You can make a grammatical error after you've been to school.
And I think that McLuhan's contribution is that. That is, McLuhan is the best describer of the environment. I think that we hope in the 20th century.
This was his idea, because up to that time, when he was writing, there was no public. Print was a great improvement of the older alphabetic writing. Print is a technology not only of movable types and of the first mechanization of a handicraft. It had all the startling implications that automation now has for us with regard to the reorganizing of work. Print reorganized the work pattern by specialism. Instead of a man knowing all aspects of his craft, he learned one operation only. And work was broken up into bits. Humpty Dumpty literally fell off the wall with print, and the types were scattered hither and thither. But print also created a new environment. Any technology creates a new environment, a new set of relationships among people. Print created the public. There was literally no public in Montaigne's time. It was just beginning to form with print. But
well, that was the time when entertainment was all over.
Yeah. Before printing, no kind of handwriting was capable of creating a public. It wasn't strong enough or powerful enough technologically to create what is called a public. With print came into existence for the first time in human history the public. The stage. Overnight, they moved into a new economic universe. Make something that is transportable and that can be used on a road system. And to read is to guess. And to guess, it runs into the phrase, he who runs may read. The word run comes from rune, to carry information. When you write on stone, you stay in the same place. You can't carry it with you. Yeah. And so the stone order is bureaucratic.
You know, if every author had to inscribe every one of his words on stone and were allowed 12 words a year, the levels of writing would go up.
Don't you tend to have the told there, telling the pain, and that's the he of it.
Now, this is a non-literate speech.
Type. With a price system that was stable.
A mass product, the book.
And uniform. But based on books. And so the stone order is bureaucratic but priestly. You get a priesthood out of stone writing, and you get an army or military structure out of paper. Because they can carry the orders anywhere, a courier system. Yeah. So the Roman thing came out of, the Babylonian priesthoods came out of stone writing, and the Roman thing came out of paper.
This was the Broadway campus of the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. Today, no one of the citizens is aware that this is the origin of the Winnipeg School of Communication.
University of Manitoba?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're in front of?
Of the Marshall McLuhan Hall.
Okay. And it happens to be 204, which incidentally is the area code for Winnipeg, but that's just an aside. Okay. Now.
Even not my test.
Okay. Okay. Well, you're not alone on that. The phrase, the medium is the message. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
I've heard that phrase somewhere. I don't remember the context.
Yeah.
But that looks familiar for me.
Okay, so as has said, it jogs your you have a memory somewhere.
At very high speeds, you can see a pattern where formerly, when it was going very slow, there was no pattern.
The conditions of information overload.
At very high speeds, everybody can see patterns where formerly they had seen nothing.
And over and over and over.
The other matter, though, of reversal of form that we already got onto. There is in IBM, for example, a phrase that information overload produces pattern recognition. Now, this is the kind of reversal I mean. When you give people too much information, they instantly resort to pattern recognition.
Somewhat.
The big road systems and the armies all over the place. But this, I studied him very carefully and worked a good deal. Then I was working with anthropologists like Carpenter and so on at the same time, so we could compare the pre-literates. Contains time. It was just beginning to form with print. But
well, that was the time when entertainment was all on.
If you can think of a sponsor or who ignores the audience, maybe the CBC in Canada. Yeah, the stage.
Overnight, they moved into a new economic universe.
So that means
a big bureaucratic organization which feels it's quite above the needs of the audience. And so it creates a great many unpopular shows. I wouldn't say they're especially interesting. They're just unpopular.
Yeah.